Welcome to the Show Announcers Academy, a webinar series in partnership with Agricultural Shows Australia, funded by the Australian Government, the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment as part of its Landcare Smart Farms Capacity Building Program, because they appreciate that we need a new generation of show re-announcers coming through to entertain and educate crowds at the 580 shows around Australia. Well, my guest today is the unmistakable voice of polocrosse, campdrafting, Australian stock horse events broadly all over Australia. And joining us from the lovely Upper Hunter today is Jim Callinan. How are you doing, Jim?
Yeah, good afternoon, Lindsay.
Jim, you have been the voice of some of the biggest campdrafting and polocrosse events around Australia. What have some of the highlights been for you and how did you get into it?
Well, we go back some 38 years ago. A gentleman up here in the Upper Hunter by the name of Brian Hunt. He kicked me off with my very first camp draft. He was a very well-known rodeo camp draft announcer as well, and he was a shearing contractor, and he had a great voice. And he just said to me one day, he said, "This is something that you should have a go at." So 38 years ago at the old Wilson Memorial Ground in Murrundi, I had my first go at announcing an open draft, and he sat in with me and just told me to do this, and you just read the scores out and just take your time. So that's, almost 38 years ago.
What are the sorts of horse events you cover these days?
Oh, well, I'm tied up with the Australian Stock Horse Society with their branch shows, and lucky enough to get asked to go back and do their national show each year. Polo cross, and also a fair bit of camp drafting.
You are the voice that we love hearing at the Sydney Royal, for instance, each year in the camp draft there. It's the World Cup. The stadium is absolutely heaving, but 90% of the people at that camp draft, and that's probably quite different to most of the other big camp drafts in Australia, they don't know what they're watching. How do you make sure they get involved with it?
Well, yeah, there's probably nothing bigger that I've ever done than the Sydney Royal Easter Show, but it's probably a different atmosphere too that you get used to working in, like going to an ordinary ag show or whatever. But at the Sydney Royal Easter Show, and the good thing about that down there, I'm very lucky to have people like Lindsay Douglas and Tim Driverman to bounce off, and they can come in and make their comments, and they do the introductions, and I just do the commentary on the actual run. So behind the scenes, that I'm very lucky to have both you, Lindsay, and Tim to bounce off, and we have our own little bits of fun. And the competitors, they all take it in very good fun too, because we try and get their family involved, and they really like that part of it as well.
It is quite a spectacle as part of the Sydney Royal Easter Show, and covering camp drafting and polocrosse and having the affiliation you've had with Australian stock horses. Do you think there is an advantage for young people to have had a strong background or strong experience in a particular part of the show arena before they get in and commentate it?
I think you're spot on, Lindsay. If you've been involved in a particular industry or whatever, you can take that on with you, and you know exactly, well, you think you do. Sometimes it can come undone. I try and read a game of polo cross about where the one's going to go, or if you look around and you see the two or the three bringing the ball down, and you'll see a little bit of the nod of the head, things might be going the opposite, but the little nod of the head might happen halfway down the field, and you'll nearly know what corner that number one's going to race to, and ready to get the ball, whether it's going to be a backhand, a pass, or one out in front of him or whatever. So I try and sort of anticipate and look who's carrying the ball, or the little nod of the head, or whatever's going on as play's going.
It is quite fascinating watching you do that, because I see a crowd of Sydney-siders who have no idea what's going on otherwise, get really invested and sit on the edge of their seats, and they straighten their backs and they put their hands around their face as they watch, for instance, in the camp draft or even in the polocrosse, what you are preempting is likely to happen if things go to plan. And they're so invested with the optimism that they tend to end up falling in love with watching it that night. But for someone who's commentating, polocrosse or camp draft, or they're at an Australian stock horse event for the first time, and they know a bit about it, what are the basics they need to get right?
The basics, well, probably just know a few of the rules is I suppose, a big help. Only just a few of the rules, because sometimes too many rules can spoil a good game.
Very true. Helps to know a few of the people out there.
Beg yours?
Helps to know a few of the people out there, the players.
Exactly. And that applies on the polo cross field or on the Campdraft arena. And as you probably know too, Lindsay, more than anybody else, there's some people you can have a little bit of a dig at and they'll take it all in good fun. There's other times that you can't say the same thing to another person because they'll take it to heart.
Yes, you learn that the hard way when you get a little bit too jovial with someone on a microphone and you realise, oh no, they are not prepared for that kind of commentary.
Exactly right.
I'm curious to know who inspired you as an announcer. Are there people you've looked around and listened to? I've heard a couple of the people I've interviewed on this program say the likes of John Nash, Graham Barker. Was there someone when you were a young'un that you looked up to and thought, oh, I love the way they sound?
Well, if I go back to that gentleman I spoke about before, Brian Hunt, and then I've been lucky enough to work with Angus and Vicky Lane, and Graham Barker as well down to Sydney. But yourself, Lindsay, and Tim Dreverman, yeah, it's a team effort. It's everybody remembers if you say something wrong, they don't remember the good work you do.
That's so. We were talking about that a moment ago with Tim Dreverman. You can have a perfect day of show announcing, and you say something silly somewhere in it that's all kind of feels like it's all blown out the window. I'm curious to know when you're covering camp drafting or polo cross or an Australian stock horse event and something goes wrong and you've got a crowd of people not from a horse background. There might be a fall of a rider, there might be an incident with a horse, it might be an incident with a beast. What do you do in that scenario when all eyes are on you?
Well, it's probably a pretty good time then to have your list of sponsors and that and go back to them and take the mind off what may have happened out on the arena and talk about something totally different. And I think I've seen you, Lindsay, and Tim, you might go to an interview with somebody that you may have in the box with you at that time, or if you're down on the ground, you might go and talk about something totally different until that incident is all cleared up and we're ready to go again.
It's a curious thing to do, isn't it? Because your mind's in the interview, but it's actually also over with the incident to see how it's tracking. It could be 40 seconds or 40 minutes that needs to be sorted out, and you've got to be so aware of your surroundings in that scenario. It's not an ideal position to be in, but it is a reality of show announcing.
Yes, and when an incident does happen like that, and you think at the time it's a pretty nasty one, sometimes the first couple of words coming out of your voice when the incident does happen right on the spur of the moment may not be the appropriate words to use at that time, but yeah, people understand.
When you go out and announce, what are the few things you do in the hours and minutes in the lead up to announcing, for instance, at Sydney Royal in front of literally tens of thousands of people? What is the preparation for you on that day like?
Well, just think about it. It's very hard. You can't really rehearse it because things change at the drop of a hat. So you just think about, well, yes, it is the World Championship Camp Draft and these competitors, and I'm thinking about, I do a little bit of homework here and there along the line, what may have happened leading up to the Royal Easter Show where they won their last draft, etc. And think of their family members and some of the little kids. And some of the little kids, I'll come back to you and say, oh, Jimmy, you mentioned our name out there in the arena. And well, yeah, you go back around to the stables and they're on cloud nine, and yeah, it's all good fun. They're a big family. The competitors and the players, whether it's polo cross, whether it's camp drafting, it's a big family, but it's a very, very good family.
It's amazing that you and I chat on a microphone for hours and hours and hours, and we think no one's really paying attention, but you mention someone's name and it really changes their day and their week. And you interview someone in the moment where they've scored a 92, or they've come out for their first Sydney Royal and had a clear run, and you put a microphone in front of them and they look petrified and they would tell you they don't want to do it, and they probably don't. But how wonderful they feel afterwards when they've been given the opportunity to tell a bit of their story or talk about the origins of their horse or who the owners are. It's pretty special to facilitate that moment for them.
Oh, it is, Lindsay. Like they're that excited and they're busting at the seams to, was it really that good? And they know it was, but they say, was it really that good? And they say, well, look up at the scoreboard. There's 92 points up there on the board. It must have been pretty good. So, yeah, it is. It's a pretty exciting time. It's an adrenaline rush.
Now, Jim, if we're speaking to someone like you, stock and station agent, but they're, in their early 20s or they've just finished school, or might be the local rural journo like I was, and they're thinking, I love watching Jim and I'm so interested to know how I could do what he does. What should their first step be? Do they need a Brian Hunt to sort of get them into the game?
Well, you probably got to have somebody to kick you off, but if you're being asked to go and do a job, one of the first things is don't be late. Turn up early, do a little bit of homework. One of the things I do notice these days with different things, a lot of people don't call people by their names. That's one thing that I notice on people doing interviews on radios and so forth. It's hello, g'day, see ya. We've all been given a name for some reason, so why not use it? But that's one thing I do notice these days. A lot of people don't call people by their names.
Such an easy way to make sure that they feel included in the interview, or they feel that the respect for them is there, and you almost can't overuse someone's name.
Correct.
What are some of your other tips for first timers, Jim?
Oh, well, you just got to be careful what you say these days because you don't know who's listening. And as I said earlier, they'll always remember the bad things you do. They don't remember the good things you do.
I have a rolling list of my faux pas now that I keep in a blog of all the ridiculous things I've accidentally said out loud in a live setting, because you're so busy preempting where you're going and what you're trying to lead up to and timing it perfectly. But you're right, you just have to be so careful about what you say these days, even to the point where you have to respect the shifting fabric of Australian society today. It's made up of different constructs of families. It's made up of a lot of diversity, and making sure that everyone's included in your commentary is an important skill to keep up with. What are some of your other tips?
I haven't got too many tips, Lindsay, but yeah, be early and presentation too is a big thing. Like if you're going to be doing a horse show or whatever, well, you don't turn up in shorts and thongs and a blue singlet, etc., etc. But that's probably going a bit too far. But yeah, presentation, and you may have only met Bill Smith or Mary Brown 10 minutes before the show, but if you can always remember their name, I got a bit of a habit of scribbling their names down, whether she or he may be the president or the secretary or the ringmaster, etc. And then all of a sudden, by the end of that day, well, they think that the ringmaster and the president and the secretary are great friends, and you've called them by name, and it makes them feel better too.
You're absolutely right. You've almost got to force the familiarity a little bit early on, just so that people feel the community of the show, people that are involved. I do want to take you back to attire though, because I do think it's important. As a bloke announcing, what are sort of the necessary elements of your attire, knowing that the weather can change and that you're out there in all the elements? What is it appropriate to wear, and what do you need to have packed as well, just in case?
Well, if it's a beautiful day, like we're having in the Hunter Valley at the moment, well, yeah, you got to be, like a person told me a long, long time ago, don't be frightened to wear a tie. Don't be frightened to polish your boots. So I've tried to do both those things, and always try not to be late. Turn up on time and be suitably attired. But then again, you've got to take the other part as well. You always take your gum boots and an oilskin, and because that's particularly probably a Sydney show, the weather can change within minutes. The sun can be shining and it's a beautiful day, and then all of a sudden I say, gee, there's a shower of rain coming, and you may get caught out without your oilskin or whatever. But yeah, you've got to take those things with you as well.
Jim Callinan, before I let you go, and thank you so much for sharing your tips today, what have been some of the highlights throughout your many years in the ring at different phases of your growth? And I know Sydney Royal is such a huge highlight because you can't beat those crowds and you never see a Campdraft in that kind of environment. But what are some of the other really memorable moments for you on a microphone?
I've been involved with the Polo Cross World Cup at Morgan Park at Warwick, going to the Polo Cross Nationals around Australia, which I've been lucky enough to go and do. And I've had a lot of fun too at my own local shows, like here in the Hunter Valley. So you just got to make the best of it, and plenty of good laughs, and you meet a lot of good people, see a lot of good horses. Yeah, so I think that's the main thing. As long as we can all have a laugh and a good time.
It's a pretty privileged job, isn't it? Getting to be the commentator at these horse events. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing some of your tips. And I hope that we inspire a number of people watching this video to get on out there, grab a microphone, find a good mentor like you, and follow what you do, and just start out nice and easy, but get comfortable, because we need the next generation coming through and helping out with all these shows.
Yeah, what do they say, Lindsay? Out of little things, big things grow.
That's absolutely right. Jim Callinan, it's been a pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you, Lindsay.